Trauma Therapist Podcast, episode 515. All right, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. My name is Guy McPherson. My mission is to raise the awareness of trauma and to support and inspire new trauma therapists just starting out on the trauma-informed journey. I do that with my membership community, Trauma Therapist 2.0, my online courses and workshops, and the Trauma Therapist newsletter. If you're a therapist of any kind and you work with individuals who've been impacted by trauma, I invite you to head on over to my website at thetraumatherapistproject.com. That's thetraumatherapistproject.com. All right, let's get started. You ready to do it?
I'm ready.
All right, here we go. So 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, folks, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. I am thrilled to have back Lisa Ferentz on the podcast. Lisa, welcome again.
Thank you. Great. I always love being with you.
Awesome. So as you probably know or should know, Lisa is a recognized expert in the strengths-based depathologized treatment of trauma and has been in private practice for 34 years. She presents workshops and keynote addresses nationally and internationally and is a clinical consultant to practitioners and mental health agencies in the United States, Canada, and the UK and Ireland. Lisa's been an adjunct faculty member at University of Maryland School of Social Work, University of Baltimore at Maryland, University of Maryland Department of Family Medicine, and is a founder of the Ferentz Institute, formerly known as the Institute for Advanced Psychotherapy Training and Education, now in its 12th year. In 2009, Lisa was voted Social Worker of the Year by the Maryland Society for Clinical Social Work. She's author of Treating Self-Destructive Behaviors in Trauma Survivors, a Clinician's Guide, now in its second edition. Also, Letting Go of Self-Destructive Behaviors, a workbook of hope and healing, and also Finding Your Ruby Slippers, Transformative Life Lessons from the Therapist's Couch. Awesome. All right, so before we dive in here, remind our listeners and myself, where are you currently right now?
I'm in Baltimore, Maryland.
Okay.
But I'm also in limbo like everybody else in the world, right?
Okay.
So I'm in Baltimore and I'm in limbo, just like you.
Yeah. How are you doing?
Oh, thank you for asking.
Yeah.
So I would say mostly really well. And I think I'm doing everything in my power to lead with gratitude. I have to tell you, as a clinician, I did not lose a day of practice, and I'm extraordinarily grateful for that. And you may or may not know, but I actually call myself Wilma Flintstone, in that I was of the absolute adamant belief that therapy could only happen face-to-face. I would never, ever do anything online. And my institute, all of our trainings in Baltimore have always been live as well. And I have to say that it's been, although there's been a learning curve, it's actually been gratifying to discover that there are ways to transfer this work. And again, I just am holding with a lot of gratitude that I was able to continue to do the therapy with my clients and continue to offer our trainings in an online format. So, that's gone a long way towards allowing me to navigate what for most of us has been very challenging and difficult.
Yeah. Are there two sides to that? You said you didn't miss a beat in terms of seeing clients. Obviously that's good, but it seems like it might be challenging. It's like you're trying to deal with the present situation too.
You're right. And it's interesting. One of the talks that I've been asked to do in many different iterations now online is exactly that, helping mental health providers to be able to hold their own, reactions and emotions about all of this and still be arbiters of hope for our clients. Sometimes it's really, really challenging, and we have to learn how to kind of contain and compartmentalize and continue to have that balance so that we're making sure that we're taking care of ourselves and processing, with whomever we feel safe processing with, the impact that all of this is having on us, so that we really can stay fully grounded and present for our clients.
Well, let's dive a little bit into that. I mean, what has it been like for you to do this?
Yeah. Again, initially I was very reticent. As I work with profoundly traumatized folks. And for me, energetically, being in the same room with somebody, is 3/4 of the work as far as I'm concerned. Being able to see their whole body, being able to, read all of those nonverbal cues, such an essential part of the work that most of us who are trauma informed, include in the paradigms that we use. And so, to get a profile of somebody and to feel, that there's some degree of distance because there's glass between us. In the beginning, it was challenging. It was
So you
challenging.
in the therapy room, there's a big sheet of glass standing up there, as well as your masks and so forth, or whatever.
Yeah, well, no. So I immediately I see I would not do therapy wearing masks.
Okay.
So I stopped in-person therapy a year ago now.
Okay.
Um, I felt that it would be so triggering for a trauma survivor to attempt to feel comfortable and safe with me if they can't see this much of my face.
Right.
And it would make it really difficult for me to fully appreciate and understand what was happening for them if I can't see their whole face. And so I immediately, transferred into the online format. So, I see the whole face, and there are
Okay.
definitely times when we're working with the body. I'll invite the client to lower their screen so I can really see their breathing and have a clearer sense of, what's happening for them. But it's challenging. They get interrupted. So many folks have young children who are either doing 100% virtual learning or hybrid learning, right? And
Right.
so, I do therapy sessions, and I've learned to ask, do you have privacy? Are you alone in the room? Is there the likelihood that will be interrupted? What do you have to do as soon as you click end meeting with me? Because, many folks have stayed very committed to doing therapy, but they click end meeting, and 5 seconds later, they're back on Zoom doing a business meeting. So, that context is important that for therapists to take into consideration,
Mm.
because it's going to dictate how deeply we go, how emotional, the client is going to get in that session, and how much time I'm going to leave at the end of the session to do containment and regrounding, really making sure they're fully back in their prefrontal cortex. If they have to leave with me and then, sound intelligent in a business meeting.
Right.
So what's the part of the loss, and I've always said so much of COVID is about loss, so many different kinds of losses, but one of the losses that for clients and therapists alike is that transitional space where a client, could end a session and then maybe even sit in their car for a couple of minutes.
Hmm.
They drive home, have a drive home, have that space so that they can decompress, so that they can do a little bit of containment, so that they can allow some of what came up to kind of resettle. And that's not happening,
Hmm.
for very committed clients who want to still do the weekly work, but the context is completely different. They do the work and then they have to help their kid with algebra. So, that's been challenging.
That's interesting. I've heard a lot of people talk about, the challenges of doing things online and with Zoom, for example, but not so much about the context, like you're saying. Well, what are you doing exactly afterwards? Is there going to be that space? Can you take the space, which also impacts what you're going to be doing or able to do in session as well, too? Yeah.
That's right. That's right. And so I think it's requiring both the therapist and the client a tremendous amount of fluidity and flexibility and spontaneity. And, we can be working on something for 2, 3 weeks, that's very deep and rich. But in the fourth visit, if the client says to me, listen, my kid's in the next room, you know, we shift gears.
Hmm.
And I think you have to allow for that kind of flexibility given that larger contextual reality right now.
What are you seeing, Lisa, in terms of how your clients are just dealing with all this? And I realize everyone has their own story, but in general, are people coming to you just even more burdened? I mean, to me, just
Yeah.
let me just say this: when all this stuff hit for me, I was nuts. I mean, I was so anxious, right? I was someone who, and still am, I love to keep abreast of the news. And
Mm,
I just found myself, the kids were home suddenly. My wife, fortunately, was able to work.
mm,
And then now I've got 2 kids and all this crazy news. I was going nuts. I was like, if I'm going to keep it together, I've got to stop
Yes.
and stop, create some boundaries for myself, which fortunately I did, but it's still very, very challenging.
Yeah, yeah, you're hitting on something. I'm so glad you brought it up, because with any other intervention that we're doing as clinicians right now, I still think one of the most powerful and necessary interventions is really being directive with our clients about saying, stop watching the news,
Right.
stop getting so, stop going down the rabbit hole of social media. Certainly do not watch the news before you go to bed. This has become something I'm reminding my clients about pretty much every session,
Hmm.
because whether it's COVID or it's politics or it's civil unrest, or, unfortunately, we've had a confluence of a lot of really frightening and anxiety producing things in our world in the last year. And so, what clients eventually do figure out is that when they make this conscious effort to not go down that rabbit hole, so to speak, they are less anxious. They do feel
Hmm.
calmer. And by the way, watching the news all day long doesn't help you in any way, right? Because so much of what's happening is not in our control. And all it's going to do is activate, your sympathetic system. It's going to put you in either fight, flight, or freeze reaction. And so the control you have is about creating those boundaries and limiting how your exposure, because I think there's a lot of vicarious traumatization literally just around watching the news or the divisiveness that keeps showing up in social media right now. So I think that that's critically important. I think there is a bit of a universality, although you're absolutely right to suggest that people react differently. And I think the more you come at this with a trauma history, the more you're going to be triggered, and the more impactful that triggering is going to be. But I think there's a kind of universality to a lot of the key issues that COVID and other issues that have happened in the world have kind of raised and exacerbated for us as human beings. So that's, we touched on losses. So there's the loss of freedom and the loss of finances and the loss of employment for a lot of people, and the loss of life,
Hmm.
and the fear of getting sick, the loss of freedom. I'm working with so many clients now, Guy, who have experienced a death and they couldn't have a funeral.
Mm.
For Jewish clients, they couldn't sit Shiva, which is a 7-day process, which is essential, to help us to begin to navigate our grief and our suffering. So many younger people who couldn't go to a graduation,
Right.
young couples who couldn't get married in the way they wanted to get married. So a lot of loss around activities and social engagements and connection. And that's been huge. And if you're a trauma survivor, you've already endured tremendous loss in your life, loss of safety and privacy and boundaries and protection. So the whole concept of loss, I think, can be very, very triggering. And then there's this huge dynamic of uncertainty. And all of us as human beings are impacted by uncertainty. We don't like to not know what's going
Right.
on.
Right.
And if there's a blank, we're going to fill it in. We're going to make stuff up if we have to, because that feels less anxiety producing than limbo and not knowing. And now the uncertainty has shifted to including things like, when am I going to get vaccinated?
Right.
And how do I even go about getting vaccinated? That's something that my clients have been in the last 3 or 4 weeks. They're constantly wanting to process in a therapy session. And just, of course, the relentlessness of everything that's happening. I think one of the biggest triggers, though, is the need to do physical distancing. And I like to use the term physical distancing as opposed to social distancing,
Hmm.
because we can't afford to do social distancing.
Right.
We have to keep finding ways to connect. One of the interesting things to notice or to know is that when we're threatened, when we're stressed, when we're overwhelmed or frightened, it is literally in our DNA and in our biology to reach out and do social engagement. And so think about that. We're wired to want to do social connection in response to anxiety, fear, or overwhelm. And yet what we've been forced to do for a year now is social disconnection, right? To maintain that 6 feet, to wear that mask, to not go to all the places that you normally go to, that give you comfort, that help you to feel, that give you a sense of identity or a sense of belonging, the communal gatherings that we all need in our lives in order to feel connected. So although it's absolutely necessary, and I do want to emphasize this, I'm not in any way saying don't do physical distancing. It's obviously necessary, for our physical and medical safety. but it's really not good for our emotional and psychological well-being. And a lot of people are experiencing PTSD around that degree of isolation and feeling that degree of disconnection. In general, Guy, there's going to be a ton of PTSD fallout from all of this. The mental health aspect of everything that we've had to go through and endure, in an attempt to stay safe. And so, I tell my colleagues, like, get ready, because we already are seeing dramatic increase in substance use and relapsing, dramatic increase in domestic violence, in child abuse and sexual abuse, in depression, in anxiety. And that's
Yeah.
real,
Right, right.
and we're going to have to deal with that as mental health providers and help people navigate.
Man, it just feels like there's this constant backdrop to all of ourselves and all of our lives of all these things that you talked about. And yeah, I mean, for someone like myself who tends to, the needle tends to go toward more towards anxiety. It's a day-to-day recentering and recalibrating, to keep it together.
You're right. You're right. What I say to my clients is, if you get too focused on what you cannot control in all of this, your anxiety is going to dramatically escalate. I think the challenge and the opportunity, and I take a very strengths-based approach to everything. So I try to frame it as opportunity. I think the opportunity right now is to really get clearer about what is in our control, and to make sure that we are fully and proactively using our agency around the
Mm.
things that are in our control.
For
It's a
example.
For example, so practicing simple little strategies that help to navigate and reduce anxiety with a lot of intentionality, whether you want to bring on board mindfulness or meditation, becoming more aware of doing guided imagery or breath work, downloading free apps onto your phone, that walk you through very simple guided imagery and meditation for anxiety management. I think that's huge. If you can't go to the gym, and a lot of us can't because it just doesn't feel safe to do that, I've discovered all these fabulous new free exercise videos on YouTube. So I've become the queen of finding new exercise videos.
That's so funny because I
And then
have too.
right?
Yeah.
So, and then I pass them on to my clients. I'm like, I just did this fabulous 10,000 step walking thing, that like really worked up a sweat. And I needed this much space in my living room, again, meditation, yoga. I have a lot of clients who've discovered yoga for the first time, doing it online. We have control about our nutrition, what we
Mhm.
choose to eat and what we're not eating. We have control about our sleep. And are we getting enough sleep? We have control about making those social connections in safe ways. I am doing more cocktail Zoom hours with friends, than I've ever done. So it's really just kind of taking that half a step back and focusing on what is in your control. And then really, making it an intention to engage in that, reading things that are fun. I'll tell you something else that I have become addicted to, and that's jigsaw puzzles. 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzles. Now, when I first started doing it, it was kind of a way just to fill up some of my free time, because I had, I wasn't traveling, I wasn't giving trainings on the road. I had a lot of, suddenly I wasn't in airports anymore. So I had a lot of downtime. And then I did a little bit of research, and I was delighted to discover that doing things like jigsaw puzzles, Sudoku, crossword puzzles, this has an actual impact on our brain and our brain chemistry. You're activating the left and right hemisphere. Jigsaw puzzles and these other activities are meditative. So again, they calm down anxiety. They're distracting in a good way, so that if you're the type of person who's been perseverating about COVID, focusing on Sudoku or crossword puzzle or jigsaw puzzle just gives your mind another place to go. Actually releases in dopamine, which gives us pleasure and makes us feel good and positive. If you're isolating with someone else and you work on a jigsaw puzzle together, that's something that feels connecting and collaborative. I have clients who are doing jigsaw puzzles, the same jigsaw puzzle at the same time with somebody on Zoom.
Mhm.
So even though they're not in the same space, they're kind of working on it together, and they're lowering their screen to show the other person, where they're at and what
Right,
they've done,
right,
you know? So that's all the stuff that actually is still in our
right,
control. And that's what we
right.
got to grab onto and take advantage of right now.
I can see where that might even feel more elusive because there's so much seemingly out of our control. It's so easy to get overwhelmed with that, that almost like, thinking about and collecting, gathering what we can take a hold of almost might seem elusive, but so crucial. Let's you mentioned a fallout, and one of the things that it's been a lot of people have been talking about, although I don't think it's been talked a lot about in generally speaking, is how all of this is falling down on the mental health clinicians and how they're going to deal with it, the fallout with them.
Yeah.
What are you experiencing and or seeing?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of fallout. I will tell you, in addition to doing, therapy hours, I also provide consultation to clinicians, whether they're beginner clinicians or very seasoned clinicians. In the last 4 or 5 months, I have been, and I'm always so thrilled to do it, but I'm noticing this dramatic increase in the number of colleagues who are wanting to do consultation because they just need a safe place to process their own
Right.
anxiety. Um, just to deal with the frustration that they're feeling about having to continue to do online therapy as opposed to face-to-face therapy. A safe place just to process their own fear and uncertainty about COVID and other things that are happening in the world. And so I do think if you are a clinician, the two things to get really focused on is give yourself the gift of consultation supervision right now, because you deserve it. It will benefit you. It is a safe place where you can unload and process your own fears, because obviously we can't unload them in a therapy session with a client. We need a safe place to be able to do that. And we need a safe place just to be able to process the anxiety that our clients are bringing to these online sessions. So consultation and supervision, I think now more than ever, is a real gift. And I also think we have to stay mindful of our own acts of self-care and self-compassion. So no matter what modality you use, and I use many as a clinician, I've become more and more convinced that what makes everything work is when you bring self-compassion to it. And the irony, Guy, is that clinicians are often not that great. They're extraordinarily compassionate towards other people, right? I mean, that's why they're in the field that they're in, but they're not always great with self-compassion, and they're not always great with self-care. And so, again, really bringing that into your conscious awareness to just put your hand on your heart and say, you know what? It's really hard right now. It's hard to be a mental health provider. It's hard to be a medical provider. It's hard to be a teacher. It's hard to be a parent with 3 young children who are trying to learn at home. So just bringing a little bit of compassion to that reality, as simplistic as that seems, again, the anxiety comes down.
Just as you said that, I could feel it. Seriously,
Yeah.
I could feel that.
Yeah. So the self-talk is hugely important.
Mm.
If we're shaming ourselves about the fact that we're struggling, we're going to feel worse. If we can hold compassion and kindness and concern and care for the fact that this has been one hell of a year and it's hard and we're doing the best that we can. And if we can be kind to ourselves about that reality, again, our bodies soften, our physiology calms down, and we create this space to begin to think about acts of self-care. So
Mhm.
once I can acknowledge it's hard to be a mental health provider right now, the next question that it evokes is, so what do I need? What do I need to do for me? So that I can navigate this.
Right.
And what I've discovered is not to schedule clients back to back in online therapy, because I'm immobile, I'm staring at my camera, I've got blue light coming at me. I can't do that for 6 hours in a row. in my office, yes, I'm good at seeing, 4 or 5 clients, or not that I'm necessarily advocating that, but after 37 years, it comes easily to me. But doing this, 4 or 5 hours in a row, no, my body doesn't want me to do that. So once I realized that, I gave myself permission to completely change the way I schedule
Hmm.
online therapy sessions. It's very different than what I do in my office. I'm making sure in between every session, I'm standing up and moving. I have that jigsaw puzzle going at all times. I'm in my 30, seriously, my husband and I, and he's a physician, and he's just as stressed as I am. And we're working on our 35th puzzle. And it's been a godsend. He comes home at the end of the day, after doing, 20, he does 25 telehealth sessions in a row, and then he sits down with that puzzle, and it's like everything sort of dissolves, and again, we can be in a different part of our brain. Making sure that I'm eating properly, in little small ways throughout the day. Again, different from the way that I would work in my office, when I'm
Hmm.
kind of in one place all day. Walking my dog in between sessions has been another godsend. And if you don't have a pet, just walk,
Uh-huh.
just walk around your house, walk outside, walk up and down the steps, let your body move. Because there is this, I think, this greater degree of being sedentary and being more immobilized, because we are all doing this all day.
Right.
We're staring at our screens, and that immobility is not good for our bodies.
Is this situation of COVID, is it making it more challenging for clinicians, therapists to wonder about to what degree they should disclose their own feelings of anxiousness, right?
Yeah.
Because it's something uniquely that we're all experiencing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think you still, I think there's a way to do it, Guy. I think that, yes, we want to normalize the humanity of this, and that we are all in this together. And when a client says, I feel scared, or I feel anxious, or I feel exhausted, certainly saying, I get it. I totally get it, without going into any detail about what that means. I think that that's a really appropriate way to do a little bit of self-disclosure, in the name of joining, and
Mm-hmm.
again, speaking to the universality of it all. But I'm still going to tell you that the clinician's job is to be the arbiter of hope and optimism. And my fundamental rule about therapy in general is somebody has to be grounded and present at all times, and it better be the therapist, because it's often not the client.
Mm-hmm.
And so when my client, I'm thinking about, I did a couple of sessions last night, and I had, in both cases, clients who were very dysregulated. One was crying, one was really anxious and angry. And I had to stay really calm and really present, so that their mirror neurons could bounce off of that, and they could begin to calm down and get some relief. If I met them, so they're up here, right? And if you meet the client where they are, then who's doing the great,
Right.
where's the
Right.
stabilizing factor,
Right. Right.
So yes, we definitely can normalize for our clients that we're frustrated, we're anxious, we're angry, we're bored. We haven't mentioned that emotion, but I think that's a really big emotion that people are grappling with. They're bored. The microcosm of their world has dramatically
Mm.
decreased. you know um, we're doing much less than we normally do,
Right.
and so there's boredom around that, and just to normalize, yeah, there are times you're going to feel really, really bored and anxious and angry, and I get it. We're all in the same boat. I think, saying things like that is valuable, because I'm not any different from my clients. The extent to which I'm going to share why I'm anxious, I'm not going to go there,
Right.
because first of all, it's their session, it's their time.
Right.
And again, I want them to really trust that they can rely on me. And actually, I find it quite gratifying when a client says, I feel so good when I interact with you because I feel calmer,
Mm-hmm.
or I feel more optimistic. You know, um, I try to bring humor into the sessions, even when it's difficult. I was working with a woman yesterday who's still grieving the death of her husband. And believe it or not, I would say 4 different times we were both laughing in the session. And she thanked me for that. She said, I've been so consumed with grief and sadness. It actually feels good to laugh. And then she was cute. She goes, is it okay that I'm laughing? You know, so just giving that permission, yes, that's as healing as crying, So I think we do have to find ways to take care of ourselves when we're not in session with our clients so that we really can be hopeful and optimistic and fully present when we're with them. Clients need that more than ever.
So the Institute now, are you folks offering
Online.
courses
Yeah.
online or workshops?
Yep. So everything is online, and I didn't think it was possible, and it is, and I'm delighted that it is. And so I still have a fabulous faculty. I do a lot of teaching. My faculty does teaching. I'm still able to do my certificate program in trauma treatment online. So just going to the Ferentz Institute, will give you the whole calendar.
Okay. And consultation also?
Yes. So if you go to the Ferentz Institute, it's the easiest way to email me.
Okay.
And I'm more than happy to provide that. I really feel like that's something that I can provide. I've disclosed this before. I'm not a trauma survivor. So I tend to be by nature a very optimistic, positive, hopeful person. And so I like being able to provide that hope and that optimism. Not that I'm a Pollyanna about anything, and not that we ever minimize or downplay suffering, but I think that we can juxtapose suffering with hope and certainly suffering with compassion. And so I'm more than happy to be able to provide that to clinicians who feel stressed and overwhelmed and frankly just want a little bit of extra guidance about doing this work online, because it is different. Doing trauma work in particular online,
Mm.
it's not the same thing as doing it face to face.
Lisa, what is it about you, do you think, that enables you or allows you to maintain this hopefulness, the positivity? And I'm not saying you are Pollyanna, but what is it about you? What do you think?
It's a great question, actually. What immediately comes to my mind is that I was blessed with extraordinary parents. I lucked out. I just was blessed with extraordinary, loving, kind parents who made me feel special, not in a narcissistic way, but just made me feel worthy and valuable and precious every day.
Mm.
Um, and and they were optimistic, positive people, despite the fact that both my parents came from their own they were remarkably optimistic human beings, and thank God brought that into their parenting. The other thing I'll tell you, and this is not to proselytize, but I'm an Orthodox Jew, I'm a person of faith, and when stuff like this happens, I just turn it over. I just turn it over. I'm so convinced that there is a force at play that has so much more power than I do. And I just turn it over, and that helps me to not have to carry the heaviness and the weight of worry.
Mm.
And I think that if you go through life and you're not perpetually worried, and you do believe, I believe in the goodness of humanity, I believe in the goodness of a higher power, of God, if you hold that idea, and you trust that ultimately things are actually going to be okay.
Awesome. Well, Lisa, like I said, I love having you on here, man. Anytime you want to
Uh,
come on, send me an email.
awesome.
We'll have everything we talked about today linked up at the traumatherapistpodcast.com, the show notes page, and want people to reach out to you and your institute. So awesome.
And
Yeah.
allow me please to publicly thank you, because you have done extraordinary work. I get emails from people, Guy, like, from around the world who've listened to your podcasts and have caught the ones that you and I have done. So I just want you to know that you are making a profound difference in the
Mm.
world. And I thank you for your
Well,
spirit and your generosity.
thank you. That means a lot. I appreciate you saying that. All right. Well, take care. We'll be in touch.
Good. Be
All
well.
right. Bye-bye.